because my magnificent team of managers has stayed up night after night after night through weeks to compile all of the factual evidence, and we have put it before you. And we have put it before all of you in this public trial because we love our country that much. Mr. Neguse will show you that we've proven our case and that President Trump committed this impeachable offense that we impeached him for on January 13th, and that you should convict him. And when he's finished, I will return and explain why it's dangerous for us to ignore this and why you must convict, and then we will rest. Mr. Neguse.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, good afternoon again. As my colleague, Lead Manager Raskin, mentioned, I know it's been a long few days, and I want to say thank you, that we're very grateful for your patience, for your attention, and the attention that you have paid to every one of our managers as they have presented our case. As Lead Manager Raskin mentioned, I hope, I trust, that we could all agree that if a president incites a violent insurrection against our government, that that's impeachable conduct. So what I'd like to do as we close our case is just walk you through why our evidence overwhelmingly establishes that President Trump committed that offense. Now, as you consider that question of whether the president incited an insurrection, there are three questions that reasonably come to mind. Was violence foreseeable? Did he encourage violence? And did he act willfully? And I'm going to show you why the answer to every one of those questions has to be yes. First, let's start with foreseeability. Was it foreseeable that the violence would erupt on January 6th if President Trump lit a spark? Was it predictable that the crowd at the Save America rally was poised on a hair trigger for violence, that they would fight, literally, if provoked to do so? Of course it was. When President Trump stood up to that podium on January 6th, he knew that many in that crowd were inflamed, were armed, were ready for violence. It was an explosive situation, and he knew it. We've shown you the evidence on this point. You've seen it. The images, the videos, the articles, and the pattern, which show that the violence on that terrible day was entirely foreseeable. We've showed you how this all began with the big lie, the claim that the election was rigged and that President Trump and his supporters were the victims of a massive fraud, a massive conspiracy to rip away their votes. We've showed you how President Trump spread that lie and how over the course of months, with his support and encouragement, it inflamed part of his base, resulting in death threats, real-world violence, and increasingly extreme calls to stop the steal. We established that after he lost the election, the president was willing to do just about anything to prevent the peaceful transfer of power, that he tried everything he could do to stop it. You'll recall the evidence on the screen. Him pressuring and threatening state election officials, attacking them to the point of literally calling them enemies of the state, threatening at least one of them with criminal penalties. Then attacking senators, members of Congress, all across the media, pressuring the Justice Department, prompting outcries from assistant U.S. attorneys, not to mention his own attorney general, reportedly telling him that the stolen election claims were, quote, BS, not my phrase, his. And then, as January 6th approached, he moved on to attacking his own vice president, openly and savagely. We recounted throughout that entire period all the ways in which President Trump inflamed his supporters with lies that the election was stolen. And as every single one of us knows, nothing in this country is more sacred, nothing, than our right to vote, our voice. And here you have the President of the United States telling his supporters that their voice, that their rights as Americans were being stolen from them, ripped away. That made them angry. Angry enough to stop the steal, to fight like hell to stop the steal. And we showed you this. You saw the endless tweets, the rallies, the statements encouraging and spreading that big lie. You saw that he did this over and over again with the same message each time. You must fight to win it back. You must never surrender, no matter what. And remember, each time that his supporters along the way showed violence, he endorsed it, encouraged it, praised it. All part of that same demand to stop the steal and fight like hell. Remember the video that Manager Plaskett showed you from Texas? Some of his supporters encircling a bus of campaign workers on a highway. People easily could have been killed. Easily. What did he do? He tweeted it and made a joke about it at a rally. Called them patriots. Held them out as an example of what it means to stop the steal. When he told his supporters to stop the steal, they took up arms to literally intimidate officials to overturn the election results. You saw the evidence, and so did he. And he welcomed it. And when President Trump attacked Georgia's Secretary of State for certifying the results, his supporters sent death threats. You saw those in great detail from Manager Dean. What did he do? He attacked the election officials further. When his supporters gathered together to have a second Million MAGA rally, that's the rally that Manager Plaskett showed you, a rally about the stolen election, he tweeted that the fight had just begun. What happened next? It's not rocket science. Fights broke out. Stabbings. Serious violence. Now, President Trump, like all of us, he saw what happened at that rally. He saw all the violence, the burnings, the chaos. How did he respond? He tweeted praise of the event. And then, see it on the screen, he bought $50 million worth of ads to further promote his message to those exact same people. He immediately joined forces with that very same group. He joined forces with the same people that had just erupted into violence. Was violence predictable? Was it obvious that the crowd on January 6th was poised for violence? Prepared for it? Absolutely. And this isn't just clear, looking back in time. It was widely recognized at the time. In the days leading up to January 6th, there were dozens, hundreds of warnings. And he knew it. He knew the rally would explode if provoked. He knew all it would take was a slight push. Remember, you heard from Manager Plaskett, the chatter on social media, websites that the Trump administration monitored and were known to the Trump operation. It showed that the people he invited to the January 6th rally took this as a serious call to arms. That this was not just any attack. It was to storm the Capitol if necessary, to stop the steal. And it wasn't just clear on these websites that the Trump administration was monitoring. I mean, the FBI issued reports about this as a credible threat, a threat to target us. Law enforcement made 6 arrests that night before. 6 arrests. Newspapers across the city warned of the risk of the violence. There can be no doubt that the risk of violence was foreseeable. And what did he do in the days leading up to the rally? Did he calm the situation? Ask yourself. Did he call for peace? No. He didn't do that. He spread his big lie more. The most dangerous lie, as I mentioned, that Americans' votes were being stolen and that the final act of theft would occur here in the Capitol. And then he assembled all of those supporters. He invited them to an organized event on a specific day, at a specific time, matched perfectly to coincide with the joint session of Congress, to coincide with the steal that he had told them to stop by any and all means. Again, he was told by law enforcement and all over the news that these people were armed and ready for real violence. He knew it. He knew it perfectly well, that he had created this powder keg at his rally. He knew just how combustible that situation was. He knew there were people before him who had prepared, who were armed and armored. He knew they would jump to violence at any signal, at any sign from him that he needed them to fight, that he needed them to stop the steal. And we all know what happened next. Second question. Did he encourage the violence? Standing in that powder keg, did he light a match? Everyone knows the answer to that question. The hours of video you all have watched leave no doubt. Just remember what he said on January 6th.
All of us here today do not want to see our election victory stolen. There's never been anything like this. It's a pure theft in American history. Everybody knows it. Make no mistake, this election was stolen from you, from me, and from the country.
At the opening of...
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved. And to use a favorite term that all of you people really came up with, we will stop the steal. We must stop the steal. We will not let them silence your voices. We're not going to let it happen. Not going to let it happen. Thank you. And you have to get your people to fight, because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong. And we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
You may remember at the outset of this trial that I told you you'd hear three phrases over and over and over again. The big lie that the election had been stolen, stop the steal and never concede, and fight like hell to stop that steal. You heard those phrases throughout the course of this trial, video after video, statement after statement, telling his supporters that they should be patriots, to fight hard to stop the steal. And on that day, where did he direct the crowd's ire? He directed them here, to Congress. He quite literally, at one part of that speech, pointed at us. He told them to fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. And here's the thing, that wasn't metaphorical. It wasn't rhetorical. He'd already made it perfectly clear that when he said fight, he meant it. And that when followers, in fact, fought, when they engaged in violence, that he'd praise and honor them as patriots. He implied that it was okay to break the law because the election was being stolen. You heard it. You remember the clip that Manager Dean showed you earlier in this trial. He told them, quote is on the screen, when you catch somebody in a fraud, you're allowed to go by very different rules. Remember how all of his supporters, some of his supporters across social media were treating this as a war, talking about bringing in the cavalry? Well, President Trump made clear what those different rules were. He'd been making it clear for months.
So, let's have trial by combat.
And Rudy, you did a great job. He's got guts. You know what? He's got guts, unlike a lot of people in the Republican Party. He's got guts. He fights.
His message was crystal clear. And it was understood immediately, instantly, by his followers. And we don't have to guess. We don't have to guess as to how they reacted. We can look at how people reacted to what he said. You saw them. And you saw the violence. It's pretty simple. He said it, and they did it. And we know this because they told us. They told us in real time during the attack. You saw the affidavits, the interviews on social media, on live TV. They were doing this for him because he asked them to. And it wasn't just insurrectionists who confirmed this. Many, many people, including current and former officials, immediately recognized that the president had incited the crowd, that he alone was capable of stopping the violence, that he did this and he had to call it off because he was the only one who could. Let's see what Representative McCarthy, Representative Gallagher, Chris Christie, Representative Kinzinger, and Representative Katko had to say.
I could not be sadder or more disappointed with the way our country looks at this very moment. People are getting hurt. Anyone involved in this, if you're hearing me, hear me very loud and clear. This is not the American way.
Mr. President, you have got to stop this. You are the only person who can call this off. Call it off.
Pretty simple. The president caused this protest to occur. He's the only one who can make it stop. What the president said is not good enough. The president has to come out and tell his supporters to leave the Capitol grounds and to allow the Congress to do their business peacefully. And anything short of that is an abrogation of his responsibility.
You know, a guy that knows how to tweet very aggressively on Twitter, puts out one of the weakest statements in one of the saddest days in American history.
The president's role in this insurrection is undeniable, both on social media ahead of January 6th and in his speech that day. He deliberately promoted baseless theories, creating a combustible environment of misinformation and division. To allow the President of the United States to incite this attack without consequences is a direct threat to the future of this democracy.
Did the president encourage violence? Yes. No doubt that he did. Final question. Did the president act willfully in his actions that encouraged violence? Well, let's look at the facts. He stood before an armed, angry crowd known to be ready for violence at his provocation. And what did he do? He provoked them. He aimed them here, told them to fight like hell. And that's exactly what they did. And his conduct throughout the rest of that terrible day really only confirms that he acted willfully. That he incited the crowd and then engaged in a dereliction of duty while he continued inflaming the violence. And again, we don't have to guess what he thought because he told us. Remember the video he released at 4:17 p.m.? Lead manager Raskin showed that to you yesterday. The one where he said, quote, "We had an election that was stolen from us." Remember the tweet that he put out just a couple hours later, 6:01 p.m. on January 6th. You've seen it many times. You could see it on the slide. That these are the things that happen when a sacred landslide election victory is so unceremoniously and viciously stripped away. That is what he was focused on. Spreading the big lie and praising the mob that attacked us and our government. You heard Manager Cicilline describe reports. The president was delighted, enthusiastic, confused that others didn't share his excitement as he watched the attack unfold on TV. He cared more about pressing his efforts to overturn the election than he did about saving lives, our lives. Look at what President Trump did that day after the rally. It's important. He did virtually nothing. We've seen, Manager Castro mentioned this, that when President Trump wants to stop something, he does so simply, easily, quickly. But aside from 4 tweets and a short clip during the over 5-hour-long attack, he did nothing. On January 6th, he didn't condemn the attack, didn't condemn the attackers, didn't say that he would send help to defend us or defend law enforcement. He didn't react to the violence with shock or horror or dismay as we did. He didn't immediately rush to Twitter and demand in the clearest possible terms that the mob disperse, that they stop it, that they retreat. Instead, he issued messages in the afternoon that sided with them. The insurrectionists who had left police officers battered and bloodied. he reacted exactly the way someone would react if they were delighted, and exactly unlike how a person would react if they were angry at how their followers were acting. Again, ask yourself how many lives would have been saved, how much pain and trauma would have been avoided if he had reacted the way that a president of the United States is supposed to act. There are two parts of President Trump's failure here, his dereliction of duty, that I just have to emphasize for a moment. First is what he did to Vice President Mike Pence, the Vice President of the United States of America. His own Vice President was in this building with an armed mob shouting, "Hang him." The same armed mob that set up gallows outside. You saw those pictures. And what did President Trump do? He attacked him more. He singled him out by name. It's honestly hard to fathom. Second, our law enforcement. The brave officers who were sacrificing their lives to defend us, who could not evacuate or seek cover because they were protecting us. I'm not going to go through again what my fellow managers showed you yesterday, but let me just say this. Those officers serve us faithfully and dutifully, and they follow their oaths. They deserved a president who upholds his, who would not risk their lives and safety to retain power. A president who would preserve, protect, and defend them. But that's not what he did. When they, the police, still barricaded and being attacked with poles, he said in his video to the people attacking them, "We love you. You're very special." What more could we possibly need to know about President Trump's state of mind? Senators, the evidence is clear. We showed you statements, videos, affidavits that prove President Trump incited an insurrection that he alone had the power to stop. And the fact that he didn't stop it, the fact that he incited a lawless attack and abdicated his duty to defend us from it, the fact that he actually further inflamed that mob, attacking his vice president while assassins were pursuing him in this Capitol, more than requires conviction and disqualification. We humbly ask you to convict President Trump for the crime for which he is overwhelmingly guilty of. Because if you don't, if we pretend this didn't happen, or worse, if we let it go unanswered, who's to say it won't happen again?
Mr. President, members of the Senate, first of all, thank you for your close attention and seriousness of purpose that you've demonstrated over the last few days. Thank you also for your courtesy to the House managers as we've come over here, strangers in a strange land, to make our case before this distinguished and august body. We are about to close, and I am proud that our managers have been so disciplined and so focused. I think we are closing somewhere between 5 and 6 hours under the time that you have allotted to us. But we think we have been able to tell you everything we need to say. We will obviously have the opportunity to address your questions and then to do a final closing when we get there. I just wanted to leave you with a few thoughts. And again, I'm not going to re-traumatize you by going through the evidence once again. I just wanted to leave you with a few thoughts to consider as you enter upon this very high and difficult duty that you have to render impartial justice in this case, as you have all sworn to do. And I wanted to start simply by saying that in the history of humanity, democracy is an extremely rare and fragile and precarious and transitory thing. Abraham Lincoln knew that when he spoke from the battlefield and vowed that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. But he was speaking not long after the republic was created, and he was trying to prove that point, that we would not allow it to perish from the earth. For most of history, the norm has been dictators, autocrats, bullies, despots, tyrants, cowards who take over our governments. For most of the history of the world. And that's why America is such a miracle. We were founded on the extraordinary principles of the inalienable rights of the people and the consent of the governed and the fundamental equality of all of us. You know, when Lincoln said, government of the people, by the people, and for the people, and he hearkened back to the Declaration of Independence when he said 7 years ago, he knew that that wasn't how we started. We started imperfectly. We started as a slave republic. Lincoln knew that. But he was struggling to make the country better. And however flawed the founders were as men in their times, they inscribed in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution all the beautiful principles that we needed to open America up to successive waves of political struggle and constitutional change and transformation in the country. So we really would become something much more like Lincoln's beautiful vision of government of the people, by the people, and for the people, the world's greatest multiracial, multi-religious, multi-ethnic constitutional democracy, the envy of the world. As Tom Paine said, an asylum for humanity where people would come. Think about the preamble. Those first three words, pregnant with such meaning, we the people. And then all of the purposes of our government put into that one action-packed sentence. We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and preserve to ourselves and our posterity the blessings of liberty. And then, right after that first sentence, the mission statement for America in the Constitution, what happens? Article 1. The Congress is created. All legislative powers herein are reserved to the Congress of the United States. You see what just happened? The sovereign power of the people to launch the country and create the Constitution flowed right into Congress. And then you get, in Article 1, Section 8, comprehensive, vast powers that all of you know so well. The power to regulate commerce domestically, internationally. The power to declare war. The power to raise budgets and taxes and to spend money. The power to govern the seat of government. And on and on and on. And then even in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, and all other powers necessary and proper to the execution of the foregoing powers. That's all of us. And then you get to Article 2, the President, 4 short paragraphs. And the 4th paragraph is all about what? Impeachment. How you get rid of a president who commits high crimes and misdemeanors. But what's the core job of the president? To take care that the laws are faithfully executed. And our framers were so fearful of presidents becoming tyrants and wanting to become kings and despots that they put the oath of office right into the Constitution. They inscribed it into the Constitution to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. We've got the power to impeach the president. The president doesn't have the power to impeach us. Think about that. The popular branch of government has the power to impeach the president. The president does not have the power to impeach us. And as I said before, all of us who aspire and attain to public office are nothing but the servants of the people. And the way the framers would have it is the moment that we no longer acted as servants of the people, but as masters of the people, as violators of the people's rights, that was the time to impeach, remove, convict, disqualify, start all over again. Because the interests of the people are so much greater than the interests of one person. Any one person, even the greatest person in the country. The interests of the people are what count. Now, when we sit down and we close, our distinguished counterparts, the defense counsel, who have waited very patiently, and thank you, will stand up and seek to defend the president's conduct on the facts. Yes, I think they will. It has already been decided by the Senate on Tuesday that the Senate has constitutional jurisdiction over this impeachment case brought to you by the United States House of Representatives. So we've put that jurisdictional constitutional issue to bed. It is over. It's already been voted on. This is a trial on the facts of what happened. An incitement, as we said, is a fact-intensive investigation and judgment that each of you will have to make. We've made our very best effort to set forth every single relevant fact that we know in the most objective and honest light. We trust and we hope that the defense will understand the constitutional gravity and solemnity of this trial by focusing like a laser beam on the facts and not return to the constitutional argument that's already been decided by the Senate. Just as a defense lawyer who loses a motion to dismiss on a constitutional basis in a criminal case must let that go and then focus on the facts which are being presented by the prosecutors in detail, they must let this constitutional jurisdictional argument go. Not just because it's frivolous and wrong, as nearly every expert scholar in America opined, but because it's not relevant to the jury's consideration of the facts of the case. So our friends must work to answer all of the overwhelming, detailed, specific, factual, and documentary evidence we have introduced of the president's clear and overwhelming guilt in inciting violent insurrection against the Union. Now, Donald Trump last week turned down our invitation to come testify about his actions, and therefore we've not been able to ask him any questions directly as of this point. Therefore, during the course of their 16-hour allotted presentation, we would pose these preliminary questions to his lawyers, which I think are on everyone's minds right now, in which we would have asked Mr. Trump himself if he had chosen to come and testify about his actions and inactions when we invited him last week. One, why did President Trump not tell his supporters to stop the attack on the Capitol as soon as he learned of it? Why did President Trump do nothing to stop the attack for at least 2 hours after the attack began? As our constitutional commander-in-chief, why did he do nothing to send help to our overwhelmed and besieged law enforcement officers for at least 2 hours on January 16th after the attack began? On January 6th, why did President Trump not at any point that day condemn the violent insurrection and the insurrectionists? And I'll add a legal question that I hope his distinguished counsel will address. If a president did invite a violent insurrection against our government, as of course we allege and think we've proven in this case, but just in general, If a president incited a violent insurrection against our government, would that be a high crime and misdemeanor? Can we all agree at least on that? Senators, I've talked a lot about common sense in this trial because I believe that's all you need to arrive at the right answer here. You know, when Tom Paine wrote Common Sense, the pamphlet that launched the American Revolution, he said that common sense really meant two different things. One, common sense is the understanding that we all have without advanced learning and education. Common sense is the sense accessible to everybody, but common sense is also the sense that we all have in common as a community. Senators, America, we need to exercise our common sense about what happened. Let's not get caught up in a lot of outlandish lawyers' theories here. Exercise your common sense about what just took place in our country. Tom Paine wasn't an American, as you know, but he came over to help us in our great revolutionary struggle against the kings and queens and the tyrants. And in 1776, in the crisis, he wrote these beautiful words. It was a very tough time for the country. People didn't know which way things were going to go. Were we going to win? Against all hope? Because for most of the rest of human history, it had been the kings and the queens and the tyrants and the nobles lording it over the common people. Could political self-government work in America was the question. And Paine wrote this pamphlet called The Crisis. And in it, he said these beautiful words. And with your permission, I'm going to update the language a little bit, pursuant to a suggestion of Speaker Pelosi, so as not to offend modern sensibilities. Okay? But he said, these are the times that try men and women's souls. These are the times that try men and women's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will shrink at this moment from the service of their cause and their country. But everyone who stands with us now will win the love and the favor and the affection of every man and every woman for all time. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered, but we have this saving consolation. The more difficult the struggle, the more glorious in the end will be our victory. Good luck in your deliberations.
Thank you. Thank you. Now I have two, we're going to do the adjournment resolution in a moment. I have two other things that we have to do. They're quick. First, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that it be in order to make several unanimous consent requests as if in legislative session.
Without objection, so ordered.
I ask unanimous consent that on Friday, February 12th, from 10:30 to 11:30 a.m., that notwithstanding adjournment, the Senate be able to receive House messages and executive matters, committees be authorized to report legislative and executive matters, and senators be allowed to submit statements for the record, introduce bills and resolutions, and make co-sponsor requests, and where applicable, the Secretary of the Senate, on behalf of the presiding officer, be permitted to refer such matters.
Without objection, so ordered.
And a second request, poignantly appropriate at this moment. I ask unanimous consent that pursuant to the order of the Senate of January 24th, 1901, the traditional reading of Washington's farewell address take place on Monday, February 22nd, following the prayer and pledge. Further, that Senator Portman be recognized to deliver the address.
Is there objection? Not hearing an objection, it's ordered.
And finally, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the trial adjourn until 12 noon tomorrow, Friday, February 12th, and this also constitute the adjournment of the Senate.
Hearing an objection, without objection, it's ordered. Senate's adjourned.